Thank you for joining us. I'm Paul Wilson.
I'm Chris Emke.
And this is Diesel Performance Podcast. Guys, we have an awesome interview today. We're going to dive right into it. We are here with the returning reigning champion of All-Star Ultimate Call-Out Challenge #1, Justin Zeigler. Justin, how the hell are you?
I'm great, guys. How about you?
Doing good, man.
Good. We're glad to have you on.
That's right.
Thank you.
We had a short trip to get back into the office. We were back in here right away. You had a long weekend at UCC, my friend.
Yeah, we did.
Before we dive in too far, why don't we hit the baseline just in case we got any new listeners out there who have been living under a rock. Walk us through, man. What's the truck you brought to UCC for the drag race and for the dyno?
So the truck we brought, I actually purchased last fall, kind of low-key for a while. It's Levon's old Pro Street truck that Josh Scruggs bought from him, and Pro Street raced it. The opportunity came up to buy it, and the price was less than what it was going to take to make my quad cab, basically what that truck is. So it's kind of a no-brainer because we knew what we wanted to do. You know, we want to be, well deep in the fours. I'd like to Pro Street race because I just hate index racing. So it was kind of a no-brainer. We got that and took the engine and turbo setup out of the Mob Scene truck and retrofitted to this truck.
That's awesome. What is the engine and driveline setup that you had in there?
So it's a D&J Enforcer. So cast block, cast head, factory Cummins stuff. Everything Drew does inside of them. Extra G 400% injectors, 214 mils, 88 mil GT55 on the manifold with a 5.3-inch Weimer over top of it. Enough nitrous to do anything you could ever dream of. A Rosso Turbo 400, Neil Chance bolt together converter, 4 9-inch front and rears, all fabricated from Mosier. That's pretty much about the gist of it.
Now, real quick, you mentioned that it's a cast iron Cummins block. Like, this is an OEM engine block that you had. It wasn't a billet block. It wasn't a Hamilton any blah, blah, blah. Like, this was a Cummins OEM block that you had at UCC.
Correct. It's actually the same engine we ran last year.
Wow.
That is impressive. That is really impressive.
That's not something most UCC competitors get to say is the same engine as last year. Usually after a season of beating on them, they're ready for something fresh. Yeah. Why didn't you go with a billet block? That seems to be the new big push out there.
I mean, we've talked to Firepunk about it. We've talked to Drew about it, and it just didn't really make sense for us right now. I mean, eventually I want to be in a billet block, but it just wasn't in the cards. I mean, spent enough money trying to get the truck ready. Right. It was one expense we didn't have to have. And quite frankly, at the end of the day, why need a billet block when we just did it with a cast one?
Well, proof's in the pudding, right? I mean, if you didn't need it, you didn't need it to hit the insane numbers that you hit throughout the weekend.
Yeah. And the best part is I started it up and drove it off the dyno and drove it in the trailer and started up and unloaded it when we got home.
Now, what's the feeling like, where you came into UCC 2021, you won. A couple of the names, that won in past years weren't there. Now here we are, 2022. The name that won in 2019 was here, does have the billet block, has a similar, truck configuration. Was there a lot of mental games upstairs? Like, I didn't bring enough, this isn't enough. Do I have what it takes? What did that look like?
Well, I don't really get caught up in all that. At the end of the day, we got the most badass team in the game. Yeah. And we just kept our heads down and did work. The only reason I came back was because Derek said he was going to come back, and I felt like I had something to prove. Yeah. And with the amount of shit talking that he gave me, I wanted to prove it.
Now, going to UCC 2022, were your team, you in general, you as well, was there the sights of the 3,000 horsepower and you guys were just keeping it low key, letting Chris Patterson and D Rose talk their shit, and then here you come out of nowhere like, yo, fuck you guys, here I am, I'm the one that's going to make the 3,000, or was it just want to keep it together, whatever it makes, and on a whim it made over 3,000 horsepower?
Oh, no, me and Levon sat and talked probably 2 months ago, and I said, hey, look, I don't give a shit if the crank is laying on the dyno and we're done. We're going over 3K. As long as my legs are intact when I can get out of the truck, I don't really care. So, and I let Levon do what he does. And, between him and Phil at Exergy, they put a wild ass tune-up in it, and we fed her all the nitrous, and it did what we thought it would do.
All of it. How much nitrous did it consume on that dyno pull?
That was just under 6 pounds in 1.19 seconds.
0.19 seconds.
Shit.
And the RPM sweep, when I was reading the post, it went from 3,300 to 5,700 RPM or something like that in that same time frame, correct?
Yeah, so I started the run at about 3,000. To be completely honest with you, I was supposed to go to 6,300. I lifted early because when the truck picked up, it felt like it broke a strap on the front of the dyno.
Looked like it.
I couldn't see the toter home that was in front of it anymore. Like, all I could see was the sky, and the truck was moving forward pretty hard. And I thought for sure we were gonna fuck something up or wreck the truck. And so I lifted a little bit early. If you look at the power curve, it was still climbing. I got scared, but yeah, so we went from 3,000 to 5,700. So from 3,000 to 5,200, the converter never caught the motor. So the converter never caught up to 5,200. So we had 500 of RPM of actually full drag, full load.
That's wild.
That's insane.
That's wild to know that there was more on the table.
Yeah.
Right? Is like literally already broke a record at a dyno that everybody kind of trusts and respects, and really know that there was more in the tank on that one.
Too, Paul, think about this. All the time, not picking on any individual, but they'll run the truck and be like, oh, that was tune 2, there was blah, blah, blah. Like, you have data like, hey, the converter didn't grab, it didn't load, we had 500 RPM, I was supposed to run it at 6,000, 6,200. These are all facts. Like, there's data here, like in black and white, and you still achieved what you were set out to achieve in the first place.
Absolutely.
Now, let's back up a little bit, because drag racing, you kick some ass too. That's a fast truck, you're damn good at driving it. What did day one look like for you at UCC?
The drag racing was kind of rough. So I went out the first pass and immediately knocked the tire off as soon as I let go of the button. So we went back, we regrouped a little bit. Levon played with the power and the way it was coming on. Took it out, and when I stuck it in the lights and grabbed the trans brake, I pretty much decided that it was coming out the door, whether that motherfucker was dragging the wall or not. Like, we were coming out the door, I wasn't lifting. That was actually my first full pass in the truck since I've owned it.
Oh my God.
It went a 499 at I think 148, 149, something like that. And if Levon looks in the data log, and I pedaled it a couple times, and yeah, so it'll definitely go faster. It's just we got to get it there. We have time to make full passes and make adjustments to do so.
Your first successful pass to go 499, first time being in the driver's seat of that truck in that configuration. That's also nothing.
I was to say, that was a record 2 years ago.
Yeah, there's only 2 other trucks that were in the 4s, if I'm not mistaken, and those guys both have seat time at multiple events this year alone.
Right.
Oh,
and you're hanging right with them. So, there's something to be said too, as well.
Yeah, and then we came out to make another pass. Levon put a tune-up in it that he said would go 485s if it would go, and it was on a freaking run. About 3/4 way down the track, it kicked the tire and wanted to change lanes, and I came on and off the throttle, and nitrous backfired it real bad. Actually, tool upped all the valves. So we took it back, let it cool, adjusted all the valves, and was like, look, we're not going to run another run because it may go 10 more runs, it may go 1 run. So we're going to take it in a dyno day and swing for the fence.
So the same engine, same turbo setup, same everything went on the drag strip and on the dyno?
No, so on the drag strip we ran that new G55 107 from Garrett.
Okay.
And then obviously a lot of nitrous as well.
All right, so that's what was that change look like overnight? Was that an easy swap for you guys, or was that something that you ran into some challenges with?
No, it was relatively easy. Derek came over Cody came over from Fire Punk, and the kid's got it to a science. Like, he built all the tubing, turbo setup, and he's very good at what he does. He had that turbo setup swapped over, half hour.
Oh, wow.
he's got it to a science.
I mean, it's kind of crazy when we think back to like when UCC first landed in Indy in 17. Guys, it was full teardowns every night. The truck was completely torn apart.
And everything.
Everything you could imagine. Now you guys are, what turbo time was half an hour. I take it you did a tire swap and pretty much let it roll.
Yeah, we swapped rear tires, did some rear suspension stuff, but really kept it simple. The next, Saturday morning, being that we were able to choose when we went on the dyno, being the returning champ, I chose to go last. So we converted our water injection to a nitrous system and just a bunch of little odds and ends stuff to get, cram basically as much nitrous in this thing as it could ever possibly take.
That's so wild.
Now,
why'd you choose to go last? Real quick. Why'd you choose to go last?
I want to see what everybody did. I want to sit back, have the whole day to get my shit together and just watch.
well, as you were watching, were you surprised to see trucks that had data and had past dyno runs making 3,000 horsepower only make 2,600?
Damn, that's a swipe at Patterson.
Well, I guess I don't really want to get into talking shit, but
No.
there's a very big difference between the yellow dyno and the real Superflow dyno on what it's capable of, and how it actually works. I can't discredit what the kid did. I mean, he did a badass job at King of the Street making that number on that dyno. I can tell you from personal experience, I have put legitimately proven the day before, 2,600 horse on that dyno and didn't break 2K because it couldn't load hard enough. So he did it, and good for him.
Yeah.
Now, how about shifting gears a little bit? D. Rose, Ryan over at Hardway, like these are guys that were very vocal with data, with having the truck go down the track at Wagler's, very impressive numbers, and the two guys that were literally swinging dicks at one another the most were within 40 horsepower of one another.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so if they would have hit higher numbers at UCC, would that have changed your strategy at all? Like if they would have both come out to 3,000, 3,100, would you have modified anything else or done anything differently?
Nope. We knew we had 3,500 horse on tap.
Just the bold stare that you gave us. Saying that. Like,
a lot of
some
confidence behind
there.
that, yeah. Okay.
Awesome.
I trust the team and I trust the process. So
Now, what about day three? Because like Paul, you had mentioned, at UCC back in the day, guys were doing full chassis swaps, and I think a lot of that was in preparation of, they had simple swaps for, maybe not Levon the year that he did the Sigma engine, but in most cases to swap from dyno to drag race, vice versa. There's not a ton that goes on there, but to prepare one of these trucks, especially something of the stature of what
Pro
Justin
Street,
has, to get it ready for a sled pull is a lot of work. What did you think this year with them changing up the rules and having the ability to run two trucks?
Well, I was never a fan of it.
Okay.
But once it became a reality, I knew who I wanted to reach out to. Basically the whole time, even when they were talking about it, I had a guy in mind, and that's who I was going to reach out to. And they saved us a shitload of work Saturday night, so we could go drink some beers and enjoy what we just did.
Yeah.
So I brought Calvin Miller with Running in the Red. If that's one of those things, pick a truck from anywhere in the country that will go A to B every time, Calvin's the man.
That's awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about that truck and that setup?
So his truck is actually the first ever billet shide block. It's got 7 seasons of sled pulling without ever being touched.
Oh my God.
Like it has never been apart. It's got compound limers on it. Sigma pump. I mean, it's literally a super stock truck with a full factory frame.
It was one of those things. It brought back a little bit of past experience. I remember being in Shides. Like I used to go to Shides 13, 14, 15. Love seeing the sled pull stuff. And granted, that stuff isn't as popular as what it once was. At least the events, like the TS isn't there in some of those events. So it was really cool. Like we wrapped up vendor row, and I was that spectator. I was in the bleachers and I was watching the trucks go, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was a really good time. It was nerve wracking because it's 2 years in a row came down to the last sled pull on what they did would determine where I finished.
Yeah.
And both years we were lucky enough for it to work out.
What order did you pull? Where were you at in the list?
I think we were number 12. So there was us, and then there was one or two trucks, and then Derek.
Gotcha. So you were literally watching right down to the wire.
Oh yeah.
The announcer was really good announcing as Derek Rose was going down, talking about how the points would play out, and it left a lot of guys on their feet.
Yeah.
In the bleachers.
Is there something you thought about this year where you were like, man, I'm really glad we learned from last year, from 2020 or 2021, I mean, and carried it over? Like, what did you learn from last year that you applied to this year at UCC?
Just the preparation. We pretty much came in with the same game plan as we did last year, that it didn't matter what anybody else was doing. We came there with our plan. We weren't going to veer from the plan, and we were going to do what we do. So I can't really say learned anything to bring, to the next year. And I felt a little more confident, a little more seasoned, if you will, on how I needed to behave behind the wheel.
Sure. Was Levon salty that you beat his record on the dyno?
No, I mean, hell, that's a win for him too. So
sure.
What does 2023 look like for you? You gonna throw your hat for another contest, or you're gonna, just
committing right now?
Yeah, I mean, on the record,
it's being discussed.
There you go.
Well, I think the big question now is, so for years, I mean, since 17, we've been chasing 3,000 horsepower at UCC. We've talked about it with literally everybody who's been on that dyno. For a while there, it was kind of considered a long shot. For a while, it was, it's only going to happen on an engine dyno. A chassis dyno will never be able to harness the power and measure it.
Won't be able to have the tire make traction.
Yeah. So we've heard all sorts of stuff. I mean, the one year we saw a guy sitting in the bed of Levon's truck, actually trying to hold it down and add extra weight in the back and things like that. Now we've done it. Now we've seen it, where you made 3,300 horsepower, 3,600 foot-pounds of torque. I mean, it's absolutely nuts. Where do we go from here? Is the bump up now 3,500 on a dyno, or are we jumping straight to 4,000?
Well, there's some discussion going on with us and the team on where we go from here. We know what the setup is capable of. It's just, to be realistic, I was very unsure if the tire would be able to hold that. I feel pretty confident that that's a number that could hold for a long time, because everything had to be perfect. Stars had to just align perfect. I mean, everything had to be perfect or it wasn't going to do it. If I'd have got on the throttle a second earlier, a second too late, that was the difference between holding the tire and knocking the tire off. I mean, it had to be perfect and just happened to work out perfect. I don't know how much more the tire can take, but we're going to find out.
Well, you say it had to be perfect, but we're seeing consistency here. Yeah. We're seeing each time you show up to a competition that you're able to repeat these results. At some point, it sounds like that preparation is really what's paying off. Where it's not the luck of the draw, right? It wasn't random that you won UCC first place 2 years in a row. To me, that shows that clearly you know what you're doing and you're executing on the plan in a regular way. Do you think there's anybody else out there who's going to sneak up and maybe be a big player next year? Anybody who you saw competing this year that you were like, oh, they're next?
You know what? I will say, Turbo Tom, some guys count him out, and that would be foolish to count that man out. I mean, the guy's got a lot of fight in him. He doesn't quit. I see him in the next year or two, moving, into that, first or second spot. I really do.
That's awesome. I think you're right too. I think he had an amazing performance at UCC, and I think he showed sticking to that one truck. It's a bold move. Once they give you the opportunity to bring in a sled pull truck, you're kind of crazy not to, is my thought. But I like to see him trying it.
Use it to your advantage.
Yeah.
Your sanity, to say the least.
Yeah, right.
So what does the rest of 2022 look like for Justin Zeigler in the truck?
I guess there's supposed to be this engine teardown to look at the engine, because we know it's healthy right now. I mean, we know obviously we got some tool-up valves, but Drew wants to tear it down just for data. So he can see what's taking the abuse, what's not. And then once it's refreshed, I want to get out and do some ODSS Pro Street racing.
Very good.
That's awesome.
Get this thing down into the 60s.
All right, so you're looking to go faster. Any sled pulling set up for you? I mean, are you going to get out and get in the dirt at all?
Oh, hell no, not with that truck.
I love that. If there was somebody who was new to UCC and you were talking to them for the first time about competing, what advice would you share with somebody who it's their first go around?
Find a good mentor. I'm lucky enough that I've been friends with Levon for a very long time, and to have him as my mentor and all this is the difference between winning and losing to me.
There's also a lot of similarities with you two. I mean, both, DPC alumni, now, UCC winners. So, I mean, yeah, you have a good mentor, but you guys are kind of cut from the same cloth in a sense, So, it's the full team, which is cool to see.
That's awesome. All right, man. Well, hey, I really appreciate you hanging out with us and talking to us about the truck and about the UCC win. I know all of our fans are going to be wanting to follow along. Where's the best place for them to check out Zeigler performance content?
Usually on our Facebook page, about the best. Between there, on the Instagram page, I'm horrible with the social media thing. So like my wife does the Instagram stuff, and occasionally I'll post on the Zeigler Diesel Facebook page, but between that and my personal Facebook page, honestly, touching on that for a second, it was really cool Saturday night opening up Facebook and seeing the first 100 posts from random people were all pictures or videos of that truck on the dyno. That was unlike anything else.
You're not lying. Like literally within 5 minutes of you making the run, I did the same thing. I was at the show and opened up my Facebook app, and it was just one after the other about the run.
There's a lot of angles of that dyno pull, man. You can see every angle. You collect data just from that shit alone.
Is there anybody you'd like to thank?
Yeah, I'd like to thank my wife, because putting up with this nonsense is a full-time job. My son, I mean, he's my biggest hype man. He's after every pass, he's on the phone with me, just, hyping it up. Everybody down at Fire Punk, Drew at D&J, guys over at Hot Shot Secret, guys at Extra G. I couldn't do any of this without any of these guys. So.
That's awesome. Justin, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Fans, we're going to have a couple more UCC competitors on, but we thought we'd get you the numero uno, the big boss right here first. Two-time. I love it. Justin, thank you so much for joining us. Fans, stick around. We'll have more Diesel Performance podcasts coming at you soon. Thanks for joining us today, guys. This has been Paul Wilson.
And Chris Emke.
Make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Recording in progress.
I really don't like her attitude.